This is going to be super fun. My name is Jerry McNamara, and I am your host for the Best Places to Lead show. So here's where we're at. We are on a mission to positively impact 5 million people now over the next 4 years. We're already 1 year into this. I feel good about the traction that we're making, headed in the right direction. Because here's the point. I have never met anyone who showed up to work and said, you know what, I'd really like to suck today. And yet there are plenty of people who are ineffective in their role. It's not their fault. It's our fault as the leaders to make sure that we create a fertile environment for people to make engaged, autonomous, and agile decisions in pursuit of the company's goal. And so that's why we're here today. I have a great guest. I think it's super fun. Wait a second. I think I saw Lori Goldman there she is here. Lori, where are you? Good to see you. Fantastic. And so we have a guest, Mark Herschberg, goes by Hershey, which I love as someone who has a nickname too, J Mac, the Hershey. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure to be here today.
Absolutely. So let me give a little high level here, and I'll tell you exactly why I brought Hershey on to the show, right? An engineer by trade, MIT, I might add. So no slouch there in the actual training. And over the years has fulfilled roles as the CEO, the chief product officer, CTO. I have a bunch of questions about that, Hershey. And so I look forward to digging in there. I think it's really unique because you have both this intellectual side, because you're an award-winning author of the Career Toolkit. I counted them. There were 13 awards on the awards page. So congratulations on that. But I also love that you have the practical side of this. So not only are you thoughtful in thinking about things in frameworks and models and how we can approach certain things, but you've also been on the front lines and had your teeth bashed in. And that to me, I think is super cool. So you're the university instructor at MIT still, right? And my favorite that I found when I was doing the research is you were also a championship ballroom dancer. Tell us a little bit about the ballroom dancer before we get into the real stuff.
In my 20s, I was competing with the MIT ballroom dance team because it's not an NCAA sport and MIT is very much the community, anyone affiliated with MIT. I could actually be part of the team even as an alum. And I competed all over the country, went not just to collegiate competitions, to regionals, to nationals. Every year I'd go to national championships. And it was a big part of my life. I got to be one of the top in the country. Had a lot of fun, made some great friends. It is one of the best things I've done in my life.
I love it. I love unique stories like that because you don't often meet a championship ballroom dancer. So I love it. I'm going to call you Twinkle Toes, I think. We'll rename you Hershey. So here's some of the things that I'm thinking about, how we merge both the practical side with the intellectual side. I want to start with, you've really been fulfilling roles as fractional CTOs and CPOs inside companies. I personally have built a number of home run products over the course of my career. I was 100% certain that they were going to fly off the shelves. And at the end of the day, I was left with a lot of raw materials and a lot of product on the shelf because I built a product that the market didn't want. And so help me to understand as you start to go inside companies and think about companies, because I just had 17 CEOs in from all over the country here to Jacksonville Beach. And we were talking a lot about the important, painful problem that we solve and who we solve it for. And I think that's at the heart of what I'd like to hear from you. Like, how do you go through, because I'm sure you have a process to identify that you're building a product that the market actually wants?
I have elements of a process. I say elements because depending on the industry, that can change. If you have a product, now I do a lot of software, and software, you can get something out and it might be easy or it might be hard. It might be you can build a prototype in 2 weeks or 2 months, or maybe it's going to be a year. And then how quickly you can get feedback. With some of the enterprise software I've done, especially in cybersecurity, you're looking at a 6-month sales cycle or more. Other things, a shorter sales cycle. So it's really important to understand the market, define the market, get quick feedback, especially in tech. People talk about the MVP, minimum viable product, the fail fast. I hate that terminology, fail fast. It's not about failure. It's fast feedback. not
I love that.
failure, feedback. Now, you might fail some of those times, but it's getting the feedback to do the adjustment. You can do clever things, such as I know people who write books, and they say, before I write a book, I'm going to go run ads for this book. Here's the title I'm going to use, and they'll pick 2 or 3 titles and A/B test the title covers. Let me see how many ads get clicked. Oh, it turns out people want this topic, not that topic, before they've written a line of their book. So you can do lots of different things, from field testing or surveys or talking to experts, but you definitely want to create that fast feedback cycle. I've gone through pivots in some companies where we've really changed the course of direction. I've gone through tweaks. So I've seen it all, but you need to make sure you're getting regular feedback on what you're doing.
What's your best way? I mean, in software, I think maybe that's pretty straightforward to get feedback, because, people, you give it to them, you let them use it and get some feedback. Any ways in which, or methodologies you've seen or used to get additional feedback in other ways?
There's a number of techniques, and I'm going to first talk about from my engineering background. When we think about engineering something, well, we can use our expert knowledge. If I had to design a new airplane, that's a little outside my expertise, but let's pretend I was an aeroastro engineer. Well, I can think about, I know certain things. A wing has to work a certain way. There are laws of aerodynamics, so I can put in my expertise. I can build some models. We can put things in a wind tunnel, or these days are simulations. I can also build some prototypes and try them out. They each have a different amount of cost. They also each have a different amount of feedback. And you can do similar things no matter what your product is. First, you can use expertise, your own expertise. You can go out to your network, say, who do I know who understands this field or this part of it? They might not be in your industry, but they've done something similar in a different industry, and you can learn. So that's a cheap way to do things, but it might be a little off the mark. There might be modeling. And so modeling could be simulations, or again, you get some deeper knowledge. You buy some research papers of this is how they launched. And here, the example I gave where you were buying those ads before you wrote a book, that's doing some modeling, just modeling out demand. And then there's actually building prototypes. Here's an early version of the product. Here's a mock-up for people to try. In those experiences, those are concrete ways to do things. I'll note one really important thing. Whenever you're thinking about a business, I have looked at hundreds of different business plans, whether it's a company I'm looking at to join, say, well, if you're paying me in equity, I need to understand if that equity is going to be worth something, or companies I've personally invested in, or many I've passed on in both cases. There are lots of businesses that make sense at a certain point. They make sense at scale. The challenge is the go-to-market. So a classic example, if you think eBay, say, oh, you're going to have tens of millions of people and you do these auctions. Yeah, that makes sense. We need that. But getting the first 1,000 people on eBay, the chicken and egg problem. I do a lot of marketplaces, and we have chicken and egg challenges. So how do you get that first cohort? How do you get the next cohort? Because how you get, for consumer product, your first 1,000 users versus your next 10,000 versus the next 100,000 versus the next million, there are different needs of those groups, different challenges, different strategies. So you have to be very intentional, not just, well, this will work in the long run, because it's that path to success. That's where you get tripped up.
Yeah, I think segmentation is so important, because there are nuances, especially it's a little bit easier if you're, 10, 20 million. You're going to have customer segments for sure inside that. But as you do scale into 100 million, you have to be a little bit more clever about understanding the needs of the people that are going to use your product. Let me ask you one question, because you talked about needing to pivot. And I always think this is interesting, because we're in a market where we have some economic uncertainty. We've come through COVID. I think there's some companies out there that are either like narrowing the guardrails and saying we're going to focus in on the core things that are important to us. How did you handle needing to pivot when maybe certain people had an emotional tie to the product that we are going to change? What's the communication look like? What's the mindset? Well, give us like the brass tacks of, you're going to the team, you recognize that we need to pivot. How did you do that?
It has varied in some of the pivots I've done. In some cases, we just recognized that literally one company, we showed up Monday morning and saw a competitor had effectively put us out of business. Said,
Oh, wow.
okay, we need to come up with a new plan. In other cases, I've been brought in because a company has said, we are struggling. We have a problem. It's not working. Mark, we need you here to fix this. So they knew there was a problem. And I get brought on that way. But even then, when I say there's a problem, they might not want to admit the cause of the problem. They recognize the symptoms. They say, this isn't working, fix it. But sometimes you get down to, well, here's the root problem. And that's the sacred cow. And so what I have to do in those situations is really draw the link, is draw the cause and consequence and get them to understand that causality. That takes time. That can take weeks or even months. At the same time, I'll typically have to build up my own credibility. Hi, I'm the new guy. I'm telling you, your business idea is terrible. It's not going to work. You have to toss away what you've done the last 5 years or what was bringing you money the past 5 years and was working. Now it's not. So I might need to hold off on that conversation until I've built up some credibility that they're willing to hear that and trust my opinion.
It might be easier to tell a parent that their kids are ugly.
At times, yes. I can tell you as a consultant, many times I've walked in and after I put out the fire and then try to figure out what caused it, I find the CEOs playing with matches. It might not be there's a sacred cow, but the CEO is often the cause. The person who brings me in, often the cause, and I have to enact some behavioral changes in the company. That's especially difficult.
Tell me more about that, because I was just with 17 of these CEOs. And, one of them, Nathan Adams, who's, a friend of the community, he said, one of the things that no one does to CEOs is there's no one to hold us accountable. And that's why they kind of pointed me like, yeah, you're the guy that checks us down. And how do you go about having that conversation? I mean, you've been hired by that person into the building, and then you recognize, it's actually your behaviors that might be causing some of these issues.
Yeah, it should be your board. And even if you say, well, I'm the sole owner, you might want to put a board in, even though you can fire them all, you have control. But you're basically saying your job is to question me. Your job is to hold me accountable. And of course, coaches and others are a different way to do that. I think it comes down to some personalities. And I admit there are times where I've come in as a consultant, and after a few months, I've done the best I can. And I recognize there's just a wall. I've hit my head against it a few times. I say, best of luck. Here's my card for when you need me 2 years from now. But it's about the key thing for most people is that the world is not static. The world is dynamic. So what has worked successfully in the past may no longer hold true. And this might be because the way you get those first 1,000 or 10,000 customers is different from how you get the next 100,000 or million. It may be the world itself has changed. There was a pandemic. People are working from home now. People's preferences change. All sorts of things change. And unfortunately, we get trapped by our success because this is what got me here. And this was successful and this has worked. And I saw it and I struggled and other people didn't believe me, but yeah, I was right. And so you get this bias that, of course, I know what I'm doing, but the way you were successful, what worked, your technique, your approach, your circumstances are no longer true. And that's where you have to get down to. So the important thing, whenever you have these conversations, is start with your assumption. Is it still true? People are commuting on average 50 miles a day, I'm making up this number. Say, wait a second, that was true in 2019, but I think commute time is probably less today. What does that mean? Because we're selling something that commuters tend to buy. Hold on, the world is different. So go with your assumptions on your audience, on your target market, on their behavior, and see if those hold and look at those changes and then say, what are the consequences when that changes?
I think that's so good. I've had to have this conversation a number of times over the years where companies I'm advising have gotten stuck because what got you here won't get you there. And I always find that, I'm between stage 1 and stage 2 companies. And so typically it's about 50 people. It's about 15, 25 million where the CEO, the owner can't impose their will on the business anymore. We have to do it through systems and process and better communication. And we work through people not stand at their desk and say, go make this happen. And so I think your insight there is spot on, at least in my experience of working with companies. That is a hard conversation though, too, because it's like, well, but it's worked. It's like, yeah, but the world's changed. And the way in which we communicate as a 70-person organization is not the same way that we do it at 20. And so pushing them to continue to evolve. Great stuff. One of the things we talked about just a little bit, you were brought in to consult at NBC, and that was before they spun out Hulu. How did you help get that product on track? Walk me through the process that you went there, because it was not working.
Oh, I'm going to give some details, some of which are negative, but this was NBC, I think 2006. Many years ago, NBC has new owners, people have moved on. The whole product, the whole service is very different. It's in fact a different company now. So I'm not disclosing anything that's going to harm any of my former clients. NBC had an idea back in spring of 2006, and it was actually a really good idea. The idea was that they recognized YouTube was starting to get big and was generating all this money, and they were doing it on the back of content creators. NBC had all this great media. Saturday Night Live, for example, you have all these great sketches that are great to watch on YouTube, but YouTube's making the money, not them. I said, well, we don't like this. And came up with actually a really clever idea. The idea was that they would create a content platform where big media providers, NBC, Paramount, and HBO, could put their video clips, and then they could serve the long tail that YouTube served and say, we're going to make this accessible. So if I was, for example, I am a Star Trek fan, let's say I had a Star Trek blog, say, oh, I hear there are clips of the new movie, or I want to just show this classic episode clip on a blog post. Well, Paramount's not going to return my phone calls. I'm just some small blogger. So the idea is there's a marketplace, and Paramount says, well, NBC, you're running it. We know you recognize IP rights. So, okay, we'll trust you with it. And I'd come in as a blogger and say, hey, I want to put this clip on my website, and I agree to their terms and service, and they'll make sure I'm not doing anything inappropriate. And then when the clip plays on my website, there are ads that go with it, like a pre-roll ad, and we'll do a monetary split between me, my website, Paramount, the creator, and the marketplace. This was a good business model. Unfortunately, NBC announced the product. They said, we're going to build this and launch it on this date. And then they said, okay, team, how do we build this? And NBC was not set up to build it. They went out to a few vendors. They went to the wrong vendor who didn't say we aren't the right vendor. They said, of course we can build it. Oh, but we need these other people we know to build it too. That first vendor, by the way, I asked them, what is your business model? What exactly do you provide? And how do you make money? And they could not give me an answer. Said, oh, we're redoing our strategy. The other vendors they brought in were not optimized for our needs. So it was a disaster. The wrong vendors and a team that wasn't designed, because NBC wasn't about building software services. That wasn't what they were set up for. I showed up a month after it launched, and literally the way it worked, that blogger saying, I'd like to get the video, would pick up the phone and say, hi, tell me about the videos you have this week. Please describe them to me, because I can't log into the system. Okay, those videos sound nice. So you're going to email me what I need to put on my site. This sounds good.
Wow.
Total disaster. There was even a 24-hour support call. They literally had an open phone line with all the vendors. That was just, they stopped saying, we're going to call you, because there was just so many calls going on. I said, we're keeping an open phone line. So I showed up a month after that and had to start with the traditional firefighting, and had to start with what's going on, how do we resolve this, put out the fires, create the systems to make it easier, and started to get them on track. So it was quite an interesting challenge.
How did you decide what to do first? I think it's very interesting how people make decisions, typically reflective of their own personal values, their own experiences. How did you go in there and say, oh, here's the thing that I need to do first?
It's triaging the pain points. And this is something, obviously, doctors are experts at triage. If you go into an ER, they look at you are bleeding out versus you sprained your ankle. In engineering, we always look and say, what are the big pain points? But then what's the cost of fixing them? We have to balance the value to the cost. And so that's how I start with companies and say, let's look at what are all your pain points. Let's look at the cost to fix them in some ballpark terms, time, money, effort, risk. And then we're going to prioritize where to go. I'll throw into that as well. Sometimes the CEO or the GM in this case, I also look at what are their biases, where are their blind spots, where are the places where that's going to be a political battle. I put that into the calculation as well.
Yeah, I think it's telling sometimes when we have trouble inside of a company. The way I describe triaging is we're building an addition to our house and we're in the kitchen and suddenly an electrical socket catches fire. We don't go and continue the addition. We go fix the problem. It's hard to think about growth and ideas when you literally have a fire in your kitchen. And so you have to fix the issue, solve the problem over the long term. And so to your point, triaging and thinking about what are the immediate things that I have to do today so that I don't lose the business in total.
Now it's tricky. It's ideally you put out the fire before you keep building the addition, but sometimes we don't have that luxury. There may be a date by which a court resolution or new laws passing, and suddenly you have to be in compliance by this date that isn't moving. If you're in retail, the Christmas season doesn't move. You can't say, let's push it out an extra month. Christmas season starts when it starts, and you've got to be ready for it. It may be the case that you've got a partnership or there's an opportunity or a window. So sometimes the dates don't move, and we do have to do that balance. And one of the important skills is saying, which fires can I let burn? They're not going to burn down the house. They might make it unpleasant. We're going to have a lot of smoke, but it's not going to burn down the house. So we're going to let that one go so we can focus on other things.
I think it's so good, because one of the things that I'm constantly seeing is that drivers think anytime we see something going wrong, like we've got to go fix that. How could I let that continue on when I know that it's happening? It's because we need to get throughput on the most important priorities. And in this environment, I think we need to make bigger bets on fewer things. Like find the things that are truly going to make an impact instead of moving everything an inch up the field, get it a mile down the road. That's the most important thing that you can do, I think, in this environment. Super fascinating. Let's talk a little bit about the book that you wrote. So the Career Toolkit teaches all the things that they don't actually teach you in school: networking, negotiating, leading, communication, all of those things. Why did you choose to write that book? What led you to a place where you were like, this is the book that I have to write?
This was inspired by the class at MIT. So I'll give you some context for that. At MIT, they had gotten feedback years ago. Companies said, look, your students, they're really smart. One challenge we have, and it's not just with your students, it's that there are these skills we want in the people we hire: leadership, negotiating, team building, communicating, the skills we've all heard about. We can't find them, not just in your students, not just in engineers, but universally, no one's teaching them. Now, I was in the process of upskilling my team with these skills as I was developing them in myself, because I wasn't taught them either. And when I heard MIT was doing this, I reached out. I said, I've got some content here. If this is helpful at all, please take it. I thought it'd be one and done, but they said, can you help us build out some more? So I was working with them. Now, MIT, because we're an academic institution, we need the professors to teach in. MIT, we don't have adjunct faculty. That's extremely rare. You really need to be the PhD, the top researcher to go there. But there are occasional other people. We're not professors. I'm always very clear on that. And as we were developing this content, the director of the program said, our professors are obviously these great researchers, and they study things like leadership, like communication and team building. So, but you're bringing a different perspective. You've got this practical sense from being in the field and knowing what works. We need to get that voice into our program. How would you feel about staying on to teach? And so we got some other folks as well, because we got a couple of professors, and it wasn't just going to be me from the business side. We got a couple of folks, and we joined and we co-teach with the professors. And so we bring that academic, the research behind it, but then the practical how this works. I've been doing this now for 20 some years, But of course, these skills are not just for college students, not just for MIT engineers, they're universal. And having instilled them in many of the teams I've worked with and other people, I said, okay, let me write a book that's going to hit the broader audience because not everyone can take my class.
Love it. So you said it exactly right, because it's one of the reasons why I invited you to the show, which is, how was it your experience in business informed your writing and the practical parts of that book? Maybe find an example where you were like, the world says this, but that's not really how it happens inside business. This is really what happened at the front line.
Let's take interviewing. This is an area where everyone just says, well, we have interviews. In fact, it isn't business says it wrong. Business doesn't do it. Most companies have zero interview training, none at all. If they have anything, it's here are the questions you can't ask because they're illegal. So imagine the following. Imagine you said to your 16-year-old kid, okay, you're 16, you get your driver's license, congratulations. So you've been in the car before, you get how it works. You've seen me use the steering wheel, we got a brake and gas, so you get how this works. Here you go, here are the keys to the car, best of luck to you. That would be insane. You're asking for a car accident. We say, no, we're going to teach you, and then we're going to watch you at first, and after a while, then you can do it on your own. But what do we do when we're interviewing? And I'm speaking as a hiring manager, the interviewer, not interviewee. We say, oh, welcome to the team. Hey, listen, we have another candidate joining, so why don't you go interview her? You've done an interview before. Remember, I sat in one with you, so you get how this works. Here you go. Best of luck to you. That's what we do. No training. We throw them in and assume, well, you must know what you're doing. But just as every 16-year-old doesn't start out equal, in fact, most of them start out pretty bad. It's just how bad. Likewise, most of us, the first time we're interviewing, I remember the first time I was put in an interview. Just interview this guy. Like, okay, I'm going to talk to him. I guess I'll ask questions they asked me. There was no conscious forethought. I had no process, and my interviewing was poor. But that's what we do with most people. So we need to be intentional, and we need to teach people to do it because we've never taught them in school.
First of all, I agree with you, right? And I think it's the same idea that we coach people the way we were coached growing up through organizations. We don't know any better. We don't have any context. So for you, what's the right way to do it? Because I'm a big fan of developing a hiring process. I developed a hiring process. I'll tell you how bad I was at CEOing. I hired 5 people in 5 days because we had gotten $500,000 in purchase orders in one afternoon. And it was the only time where I looked at the computer and I thought, please stop sending us emails with purchase orders. Please stop sending us emails. And exactly 90 days later, 4 of the 5 people were gone. Why? Because we were hiring out of pain and not out of process. And that's when I was like, there's an opportunity here to build a model and to bring people through in a more conscious, intentional way. What is it for you, Hershey, in your experience of building teams and companies? What's that look like that you think, here are the 2 or 3 things that people need to know to make sure that they get the right candidate in? Because every great company, or at least every company that I know, they want to have great people. However, our process is suboptimal and we leave the chance getting the best people in that can do the job that we need.
It's a long conversation, but start with your job description. Any of your job description, look at that job description, and then look at the same job description from your competitors. And competitors don't even have to be in the same field, not a direct competitor. If you're hiring a director of marketing, look at other director of marketing roles and look at how similar they are. Because here's the reality. If you're hiring a director of marketing, saying, oh, you're responsible for our website and our social media, and when we go to conferences and we put on an event and generate leads, okay, that's all pretty standard. And they all say the same thing. But first, the reality is in your business, maybe most of your work is about going to events. Yeah, there's a website, but that's not a big part of it. Just keep the website running, put out some social media posts once in a while, but focus on our events. That's different from someone else where 90% of the work is your website and social media management. So don't just look at, here's the list of tasks that look the same from one job to the next. Go into what's the weighting. So start with that. What's the weighting? What does it mean to be successful in our social media? Because it's not just doing posts. Is it we need someone who creates engagement? And what is engagement? That mean you're getting lots of likes? Or is it this is going to convert? So be very specific. Here's a task. Here is how important that task is to this job. Here's how we recognize this task is successful. And then you can go and measure people against that very concrete requirement. Now, the other part of it, tasks are only half of it. We forget this. There are all the other attributes that we need, from cultural fit to leadership to working with others. One thing I hate, and I was guilty of this when I was earlier in my career, we'd say strong leadership skills. Okay.
What does that mean?
Right. It's better than weak leadership skills, but there's a difference between here's a team of 20 people and they've been working together for 5 years and they work well and we need someone to lead the team. Very different from here's an incredibly demoralized team and you need to reinvigorate them versus here's a brand new team and half the people are new to the company and they don't even know our processes and you have to lead them. Those are all leadership, but they are different. And someone who may be a good leader in one of those scenarios may not be in another. And that's okay. But we need to say, this is a type of leadership we want. This is a type of teamwork or collaboration, or this is our culture. And searching for that as well, being intentional in our hiring process with that.
I love that thinking, because I can't tell you how many times I've seen people are like, oh, we need to hire for this position. And they copy someone else's job description and then make it their own. It's like, that's not your company. What are you doing? And it's amazing the level of, I don't want to say laziness, but sure, laziness in just like, oh, let's get the thing up. Let's check it off the to-do list. And one of the things that I've always thought about in a job description is it's a marketing piece. I am marketing for someone to say, like, I'm going to choose this company. And so you better be, I don't know, you better not be another Me Too company copying someone else's job description. You better turn that around, which is, here's what we need from you. Here are all the things we need from you. I always say, like, here's what we're going to give you as a company, because we want to create a compelling company where people love to be there. They get surprised when they get paid on the 15th and the 30th. They're like, holy shit, this is amazing. I got paid to do this work. That's incredible. And yet we don't present our company in a way where people go, that's the company that I should go work for.
One of my more popular blog posts is what HR can learn from marketing. And it's exactly it. You are selling jobs. Sit down with your marketing team. Just say, can you help me punch this up? Make it a little better, make it snappier. I now put in all my job descriptions why you'll love this. What makes this job great? That is the selling. We can talk about, if you think about you're selling a car, you say, oh, here's the gas mileage and here's the trunk space. And here's also, that's important. I need to know that. But they also say, and here's why it's a cool car. And they show the commercial of driving along the beach or whatever it is. They sell you that. You have to sell the job post. Why will you love this job?
I know. And then we wonder why we are not getting any compelling candidates. Why is no one interesting? Applying to our company is great. Yeah, they don't know that. I think that's really good.
And think about multiple audiences, because what applies to men may not apply to women. If you're saying we want more diversity, we need more women, we need more people from this type of group, is that targeted to them? Will it appeal to them? And you might say we're going to do a broad one, but just make sure it can appeal not just to whatever you look like, which for me means white guy.
Yeah. Old white guy. We're getting to be that point, Hershey. We're old white guys. Talk to me about meetings, because I know this is inside the book. I'm astounded by the number of meetings that companies have. As I was doing research, there's about 55 million meetings held each week in the US, 11 million per day. That's just crazy. And people generally suck at running meetings and holding meetings. What is your practical approach and advice as someone who's inside companies, running companies? What is your approach to meetings?
First, I'll note, I like meetings. Meetings aren't bad. They've gotten a bad rap because they're inefficient. If you think about the work we do, there are the individual contributors, whether they're on the assembly line turning screws, or for knowledge workers, creating a report, tallying the numbers and closing the books at the end of the month, whatever it is they are doing. Meetings don't necessarily help them. They're there to do, but they will need some meetings. They need some information. Meetings are a way to do it. For middle management, senior management, I'm not creating that report. I am coordinating, and meetings are usually the best way to do it. Now, I need to be respectful that those who are more individual contributors, I want to minimize their time in meetings because they need to be doing. Now, to make meetings effective, you just have to recognize there are 3 simple types of meetings. The first type is broadcast. Broadcast is, I am going to share knowledge with you. That might be your quarterly all hands meeting. The executive team says, let me give you some updates. Or your team, you say, I'm the boss. I want to let you know what's happening with the release, with the whatever's going on. Then there are end-to-end meetings where we are all coordinating information. This is probably your weekly meeting that you might do at executive level, at team level. Those of you who do software engineering, you've got the daily scrum, that's 15 minutes. And that's all of us are going to go around and give some update. Now, it doesn't mean literally everyone has to give the same update, but it's multiple people coming together to share status information with other people in the meeting. That's the second type. The third type is a decision. You have to decide something. You have to have an answer by the end of the meeting or a next step to get to an answer. Those are the 3 things you do in a meeting. You might do one of them. You might do multiple ones. But if you break it down this way, you can say, okay, what are we trying to do in this meeting? And therefore, who do we need in the meeting to achieve that goal? Where we run into mistakes is where you say, well, I'm the manager and I get my team together once a week and I need Lori from accounting. You're going to broadcast to me update on accounting. The other people don't need to hear it. They're just in the room. Okay, thank you, Lori. And now we're going to have Dave, and Dave's going to give me the operations update. And it's for me, it's a broadcast, has to be a one-to-one broadcast. Other people are just sitting there. Now they're wasting their time. That's different from I need Lori and Dave and others. And we're all going to report because you all need to know what's happening with each other. So when you misalign the people for the meetings, that's where you run into trouble. And that's where I say, this is inefficient. This isn't a good use of my time. The other thing that happens is you have the meeting and you say, okay, we're doing our weekly everyone report in meeting. Someone says, oh, we have to make a decision. Oh, okay, let's make a decision. Wait, we need Ronnie for that decision, but he's not in our regular reporting meeting. And no one says, time out, we need Ronnie for the decision. They just tack it on. And so our meetings start to evolve, but they evolve in a way that we're not optimized for.
I'm going to challenge you on this one.
Please.
Because I look at what companies are doing, particularly fast-growing companies, where they use meetings to communicate information that should be communicated asynchronously. That if you are using technology, which you have to in today's day and age, and you're using project management platforms or Slack or email, that you can put together information that at my leisure, we don't need to stop the company and bring 5 people together in a department to have a conversation about updates when we should all be, as part of our project management flow or leadership conversation, putting that information into the market. How do you balance that? Because I just find the lack of trust and the lack of ability to communicate effectively on multiple, methodologies leads people to just say like, well, let's just call a meeting. And sometimes, like you were just saying, like, why am I in this meeting? I have no idea why I should be here. And I tell people, excuse yourself as quickly as possible once you realize you shouldn't be in the meeting. But I just find that it's a crutch as opposed to an effective tool. Any feedback on that?
Yeah, I'm going to disagree. I'm going to give you an analogy. Think of meetings as hammers and Slack and email as a saw. What you just said is we have these hammers. We keep breaking boards in half with a hammer. It's really frustrating. Hammers aren't good. No, hammers are perfectly fine. The mistake is that you're misusing the hammer. use a hammer for the nails, don't use it to cut boards in half.
Mm-hmm.
And so I talk about this in the book as well. There's a proliferation of communication channels. There are meetings,
Totally.
there are emails, there's Slack, there's phone calls. We need to recognize there's multiple channels and use each channel, use each tool for what's optimized for. Where we get into problems is sometimes we have so many tools and they can be a little multi-purpose. We can do a couple things with them. A problem I see over and over, because I work in tech companies and Slack is very common.
Yep.
We have Slack, we have email, we have Confluence. That's a wiki, a very popular version of it. Say, well, should we put this in email? When do you use email versus Slack or other instant messaging? When should we put something in Slack? Well, what's great about Slack is we have a record of it all. And even people join the company later when they join the Slack channel can see it. That's not true with email. But shouldn't we keep records on our wiki? And so it gets very confusing. And what we need to do is be very clear on this channel is used at this time for this purpose. And if you do that, you say meetings are when we need to have that synchronous conversation, or maybe it's something asynchronous, the quarterly update. Yes, you could email the whole team, but it's kind of nice to bring the team together and you have beer and snacks, or you have some QA. Say, okay, we're going to choose to intentionally do this, even though there are other options. We just need to be intentional with how we use what tool for what problem.
Wait a second. You work inside companies where they have beer? I'd like to apply.
That's very common at tech companies.
I love it. I think you're exactly right. I have a company that I work with that's in tech, and Jira, Confluence, email, Slack. And one of the quarterly objectives last quarter was being very clear about when we are using which channel for what type of communication, even down to when you're on the to line, you're expected to respond. If you're on the CC line, it's just information for you. And they were having this issue where everyone was on the to-do line and no one responded because no one knew exactly who was being tasked with what the question was. And so I think getting clear, especially as we increase the velocity, even down to text messages, stop sending text messages because now that's only on two different places. No one else knows or has context on that decision that was made, and they can't figure it out. So,
right. Now, it might be fine for, hey, I'm going to be 5 minutes late to the meeting. Great. Absolutely. And then we define that channel for that purpose.
Yeah. Amen. I think we could go on and on about meetings, because my big belief is that in today's day and age with technology, there should be lots of asynchronous communication because it's not required to be in person to be delivered. And that meetings truly should be with stakeholders and solving problems. If you're going to put the most significant people inside of a company in the same room and stop business, you better be solving a problem or creating a solution while doing that. But that's my own personal feeling for sure. Tell me a little bit about accountability, because I think this is a hot topic. My personal belief is, people who do this right take good companies and they make them great, and great companies become superhuman. So as you look at your role as a fractional CPO, CTO, any difference of how you're driving accountability when you're technically outside the organization versus maybe someone who's W-2 showing up every day?
I think people put too much into you're a contractor versus an employee. And I tell everyone on my team, I don't care what you are. That is an accounting status. That is between you and the IRS. That's really all it is. It's just how you are reporting your taxes. It has no impact on how you actually do your job. So I draw no distinction. I encourage companies to draw no distinction and just say, you are either on the team or off of it. You might be on the team full-time. You might be on the team part-time. How you work, maybe you only work mornings or certain other constraints. But that's really what it is. You have a job. Let's be clear on what the job is, what your objectives are, and how you get paid. That's really not relevant to what we're actually doing here.
So how do you drive accountability within your team? Any tips, tools, tactics, anything that you do uniquely to, obviously you've been very successful. And so how are you driving execution through accountability?
One of the big things I find is people don't have context. People get their role. I write software. I do the accounts payable. They know mechanically what they're doing, but they don't always have the context. And so something I always make sure I do is with my teams, we'll have a regular meeting where I will explain, here's what we're doing. Here's our roadmap. Here's what's happening. Here's what's happening in the rest of the company. Here's the overall company strategy. I might reiterate that from the CEO or explain what they heard at the quarterly meeting, how this actually applies to our group. But let's also talk about what's happening in these other departments. In fact, I'll regularly invite my peers in the other departments to come and talk to our team and give them insights. Because so often in whatever we do, we know our team, we might know an adjacent team where we work closely at, we're going to implement something together. But the rest of it is a black box. And we throw something over the wall. We just say, yeah, marketing. I know they do our website and I guess they help sales find people. That's what marketing does, right? But they have no idea what exactly marketing does, where they spend their time, what their pain points are. And if we can all get a little more insight into what the other teams do, we can start to see how we generate more value.
I think context is so important. The lack of appreciation across the organization sometimes is astounding to me. Like, oh, those people over there. Yeah, they're the people that count the beans and send you your paycheck, right? I mean, you have to know across the organization what people's roles, responsibilities, and to your point, objectives. I was reading about a study, 4,000 companies over the last 3 recessions. Only 9% of companies grew their revenues. And one of the hallmarks was that they drove objectives and decision makings down to as low as they could inside the front lines of the organization, because those people knew best. And so we were able to move faster and do things better. And yet, without clarity of what those objectives are, there can't be any accountability. And I think that's a key piece that leaders miss. It's like, oh, well, didn't you know what you were supposed to do? And to your point, no, they didn't have the context of what they needed to do.
Everyone in the company should know how they generate revenue and or drive value for their customer, internal or external. Now, if you're not clear on that, talk to your boss. If you're a boss, make sure everyone on your team understands that, because that's the connection they need to have.
Say that again. That was so important, because I think I say this all the time. One of my goals is that all people, when they go home, they know how they contribute to an organization, so that when their spouse says, did you have a good day today? You can answer that question. There's a lot of people that go home and shrug their shoulders like, I don't know. I think so. I think I had a good day. So say that again, because it was so good.
Everyone needs to know how they generate value for their customers or create revenue for the company. Ideally, both. Those should be linked. But you need to know concretely, here's how my actions today, doing this, sending this email, stamping this report, whatever you do, here's how this action generates value.
I love that. I love that. I think the other piece of it is, when I would hire people, I would take them through a profit and loss statement. It was every category. And I would highlight, you're in this category. Payroll, this is you. Benefits, this is you. Office supplies, this is a place where, hey, keep your eyes peeled. If there's a way that we can decrease our costs here, then that's how we can reinvest in our people, and I can give more money back to you. And so when you start to get people into that mindset of like, oh, what I do here makes a difference. Yes, it makes a difference. But you have to give them that roadmap of like, oh, here's exactly how I contribute to the organization, both on the top line and on the expense side. And I think that's a great spot. Walk me through, Hershey, as we get to close up the hour. I really appreciate anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat, because talk about some golden boulders. There are some really great pieces of information here. Here's something that always astounds me, because when I think about my business acceleration model, the outermost ring, the thing that makes us go faster and faster and faster, is curious learning organizations. And the whole notion of upskilling is, I don't know, it seems dead simple. Yet there's a DDI survey that came out. CEOs only trust 48% of their senior leaders to deliver results. And it gets even worse when you look at the next level of leaders. They only believe in 11% of the people behind the CEO. And so for you, why is it important to upskill your workforce?
When you upskill your workforce, and I have a particular way I recommend doing it, which is creating small learning pods, and we can talk about how to do that, these peer learning groups. When you do that, you get these 4 great advantages. First, you've upskilled your employees. You have a more effective team. Second, you are creating better engagement. We know employees today are saying, I don't just want a paycheck. I want to know the company cares about me. I want to feel personally, I want to feel I'm going somewhere that's not just a paycheck. And so that engagement helps create retention and attracts new employees. Third, by doing it in these small learning groups, you are creating internal networks. Very important for people to get to know people outside of their group so they can get that visibility. And then finally, by having a common way you're upskilling people, you're creating a common language. So when you teach someone a new framework, a new way to look at things, people can say, oh, we're going to employ this technique. We're going to use SWOT. Everyone says, oh, I know what SWOT is. We learned that last month. So you're going to create a common language to be more effective. So you are upskilling employees, creating engagement, fostering internal networks, and giving a common language for efficiency.
I love that. That is so good. It is interesting, some of the common language things. I work inside a financial services firm. They have an acronym for everything, Hershey. And it took me about 8 months to figure out exactly what it was that they were talking about. I was like, can you guys get me a glossary of all these terms that you're doing? But they had the common language. It wasn't important that I had it, but they had it.
Okay, by the way, you should have a glossary of terms. I recommend all companies create that glossary of terms so new people, when they show up, can say, I'm going to this page to learn it. And if they don't see it, they ask and add it to the page. But we talked about the benefits. Let me talk about how this actually works, how you can implement it. So
that's what I want to get to.
If you want to upskill your team, your department, your organization. Now, I have a free resource on my website that goes through how to do this that we'll tell you at the end.
Yep.
But what you want to do is create these small peer learning groups. You want to get people together from different departments. Don't put all your accountants in one and all your engineers in another. You want the accountant and engineer and salesperson, operations person. You want to get the diversity of thought. You bring them together. You engage them with some content. Now, if you want to use my book, there is a way to do it. If you don't want to use my book, use a different book. Use articles, use a great show like this one. Say, we're all going to listen to this episode, or we're all going to read a few pages of this. And then we come together to discuss. And it's in that discussion, that's where the learning takes place, because these skills, they're not learned by saying, memorize this. If you want to teach people how to use the new expense reporting, send them the email, do the one session, and they've got it. When it comes to teaching leadership, when it comes to communication or team building, these are experiential. And so you want to get that small group, and it's in that discussion where we talk about, hey, here is a leadership challenge I had before. And you'll share your thoughts and she'll have her thoughts. Oh, I never thought of that. That's a good idea. And that's how we learn and grow. This is the equivalent in sports. I can't just tell you the rules and you know how to play. You have to actually practice. You have to do drills and scrimmage. And this group, because I can't do, hey, everyone, I'm going to lead differently today. If I screw it up, say, timeout, do over, that leading doesn't count. But in this group, we can talk through situations, hypothetical ones, past ones, current ones, if it's appropriate. You can do case studies, or you can talk through the content you've read. And it's in that discussion about how we'd approach it. That's your drill. That's your scrimmage. And that's how we develop the teams. And that small group, that's where we're going to develop that common language and those internal networks and all the other benefits.
I love it. I know my wife, who was a VP of a pharmaceutical company, they do a book club. And I think it's fabulous. I've been doing it for about 2 years now. And to watch them cycle through, and occasionally I get to listen to people's insights, I'm like, that's really good. I mean, you foster those connections. Is there, in your model or the way you think about it, in the small peer learning groups, what's the ideal number of people? Any insights?
I recommend about 6 to 8 people.
Okay.
You can do a little more, a little less. There are ways, and I talk about how you can scale this up. If you want to do it with larger groups, you can do it. You can adjust the model And it's really what works best for you. But ideally, groups around 6 to 8 people.
I love it. My number one strength on Strength Finders is learning. I think it's why I've been able to run 5 companies in 5 different industries, because I've never been the technical leader. Leading people is the same anywhere I go. But the whole notion of how we learn, how we retain information is, God, I just love it. You can't see it, but I have hundreds of books behind me here. You've built an app that helps people retain information. And I think it's so clever. I have downloaded it. It's like a little daily affirmation, if you will. Tell us about the app that you've built to help people have the knowledge when they need the knowledge, because the whole idea that I've read all of these books, I'm not exactly sure when I'm going to need that framework or that idea. What's the problem that you were solving with this app and how you brought it to market? I think it's great.
I created the free Brain Bump app. And the motivation is that where you read information isn't where you need information. Now, the sources, it comes from books, podcasts, and shows like this, talks, blogs, all sorts of sources. But it's that you read something or listen to something, probably sitting at home, and what happens? I'll give 2 examples from my book. Well, I've got a chapter on networking. You're going to read that thing at home, but it's 2 months later as you're going into a conference that you say, I need those networking tips now. So with the app, it's like a flashcard app, but it's not Q&A, it's just tips, and everything's tagged by topic. So you pull out the app, you go networking, and now you've got all the networking tips. You flip through it right before you walk in the room, and now it's all top of mind. The other usage mode, you mentioned that daily affirmation. So we'll send you at a time you request, if you don't want, you turn it off, a daily push. You don't even need to open the app with one of those tips. You might say, okay, I'm a new manager and I read this management book, but I don't know exactly when I need this technique or that one. I don't want to forget it all because I'm not using it. So we know spaced repetition is how you remember each day at the time you set. So let's say 9 a.m. as you walk in the office, you're thinking, okay, day's about to start. Get that tip, takes you 2 seconds to look at. Say, okay, right, good idea, swipe, done. But that's going to help you retain what you've learned. You invested the time in the class and listening to this episode and reading the book. 2 extra seconds a day helps you retain it.
I think it's so clever and it's so great. I always laugh and I tell people, I've read so many books over the course of my life. I just love to read online, that I'd love to give people all the credit for who inspired ideas. And I can't, it's like the universe gave it to me. I'm not sure. I'm not trying to take credit for other people's ideas. I just don't remember what book I read it in or what article I read it in. But I think when, again, I'm researching, getting prepared for this interview, which has been terrific, I just thought, wow, this is great. This is for me. I need to download this app because there are times where I get myself in situations like, networking. I bet you there's a handful of things I should be doing here. Let's look at what I should be doing. And I think it's so clever. So I think it's great.
I had the same challenge trying to remember the things, and that's why we have the search function. So it was something about an elephant. Type in the word elephant, and there's that thing and who gave it to you.
I think it's great. I think it's so fun. Hershey, you have been terrific. I don't know if anyone has any questions. If you do, you can come off mute and ask the question or put it in the chat. But if people want to find more of you, where are the best places to go? Because you have a book, you have an app, I'm sure a LinkedIn profile. You tell us, where can we get more of you?
I'm going to give you 2 websites because I have these 2 different brands. For the book, if you go to the careertoolkitbook.com, you can learn more about the book, where to buy it, Amazon, elsewhere. I have a weekly blog on there. You can get in touch with me, follow me on social media. There's also a free resources page. Everything but the book is completely free. I don't even ask you for your email. The first thing on the resources page is how to create that peer learning group for your organization, completely free. Download it. In fact, you can even, the copyright's written, you can cross out my name, put your name on there and say, I have a great idea for our organization. I want you to learn. I don't need the credit. So that's all at the careertoolkitbook.com. Then for the free app, if you go to brainbumpapp.com, there you can follow through to go to the Apple and Android stores to download it. There's a 90-second video that shows you how the app works. Everything is free app, free content. Download it, set up, explore the content. The Career Toolkit does have our tips. on the app. So go to brainbumpapp.com and you can download the Brain Bump app to help you retain all the things you learn.
I think it's great. You're giving away too much value for free, Hershey. I'm worried you're going to eat mustard sandwiches here soon. So I hope you start charging for these things, or that the book's flying off the shelf, or your technology equity is paying off for you.
I make my money book sales for anyone who wants to write a book. That's not how you make money. I make money because companies and conferences bring me in to speak. And I am quite happy to give away as much value as I can, giving away the app for free, giving away these resources for free. I'd rather more people get helped, even if I lose out on some dollars, than if I made a lot of money, but people were still needing to do better.
I'm with you. That's why we do this. I think we're better together. I've had my teeth bashed in business. I'm sure you have too. My point is let me just share the lessons that I've learned so that other people don't have to get their teeth bashed in. They can get there faster than I did. So good. I really appreciate you being on the show. I think there were so many nuggets of gold here today. I thought it was super fun. For me, I think one of the things that I really honed in on was the whole notion of needing to get feedback. Right? I think so many times companies bring products to market, myself included. Let me raise my hand and say, how do we increase the velocity of the feedback to make sure that we're bringing to market a product that actually makes sense? Because that's what it's all about. We have to solve a problem that is important enough and painful enough that even in a recession, people will still pull out their wallet and pay you for that product. So I think it's super cool. Now, listen, let me close with this. I'm on a mission, 5 million people over the next 4 years. And so I need your help. So if you can recommend a friend to come join us, if you can like the posts that we put out on Facebook, on LinkedIn, comment, join our community on Facebook, Best Places to Lead, I would love to have you. And I'd love to have you come on the mission with us, because at the end of the day, there's no one that shows up to work and says, I really want to suck. And my goal is to help our senior leaders create environments that are compelling companies, because compelling companies always outperform. And the trick is, let's make sure we also get home for dinner, because success without fulfillment is the greatest ripoff in life. So join me on the journey. Next week, I'm going to be traveling. I have prioritized mindset and family in 2023. So it's spring break for my kids. We are going on a trip with our kids. So there'll be no show next week. But the week after, March 23rd, we have a technology guy. He is super fun, super interesting, high energy, very introspective too, a unique combination. So William Harris, he's the CEO of Element, was an Inc. 5000 award winner. He's going to come share his lessons from the front line so that we can all lead a little bit better. So thank you so much for being here. Appreciate everyone's time, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.